morning and welcome to Rising. That's the name of our show, and it's a really excellent one today. Hello, Briahna.
Hello, Robby.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I feel like you throw the tiniest of monkey wrenches in the beginning of the show just to make me lose composure and laugh at the top of the block, and I'm not mad at it,
You're
Robby.
on to my plan.
I'm mad at it.
Well, some very interesting things going on. We're going to talk to The Intercept's Murtaza Hussain, who will join us later to discuss his reporting on the FBI's entrapment of a disabled teenager. Also, Justin Goodman from the White Coat Waste Project will break down what a recent FOIA request filed by his organization revealed about the origins of COVID-19. But first, we've got some breaking news to get into. Take it away, Briahna.
Well, Robby, Hunter Biden is expected to plead guilty to tax-related misdemeanors as part of a plea agreement with the U.S. attorney in Delaware. According to court documents filed this morning, Biden will plead guilty to 2 minor tax crimes. In exchange, the gun charges against him are expected to be dismissed should he meet the conditions of his probation.
Legal experts told NBC News that Biden is unlikely to face any jail time in the case. In a statement, an attorney for the president's son said, quote, "I know Hunter believes it is important to take responsibility for these mistakes he made during a period of turmoil and addiction in his life. He looks forward to continuing his recovery and moving forward." Conservatives are quite upset about this, kind of alleging a double standard going on here. Ben Shapiro tweets, "If you didn't pay your taxes to the tune of $1.2 million and also signed a federal gun form stating you weren't a drug addict while, being a crack addict, you also would probably be getting a sweet plea bargain deal if you were the president's son."
Yeah, and I've seen some liberals pushing back and saying, well, Donald Trump's tax crimes are more serious than any of Hunter Biden's tax crimes. I mean, at the end of the day, he is not the president as much as people want the headline to be Joe Biden did X, Y, and Z. It is, in fact, Hunter Biden. He has obviously had some troubles in his personal life that are salacious and maybe even interesting, but aren't especially newsworthy for folks who are really hoping for the smoking gun that showed some kind of collusion between Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. So he
acquired this gun at a time when he was abusing drugs. He says he was not literally using drugs at the time. He filled out the form for the gun, which that would have been a crime.
Because you have to attest that you are not on drugs.
His ex-girlfriend at the time, his brother's widow, Haley Biden, was like, "You can't have a gun right now. You're on drugs." Threw the gun away in a dumpster. Apparently, that was near a high school. That's a no-no too. She's not been charged with anything, but that's bad. Don't do that. Look, I support gun ownership, legal gun ownership, and I don't think drugs should be illegal, frankly. I don't think that's the right way to deal with people who have addictions. So I'm like hard pressed to get really worked up that he's not being charged more heavily. I'm sure it is a double standard. Lots of people without the access to material wealth and fame and have a famous name and political connections absolutely would have had the book thrown at them. I was seeing some reporters mentioning how some of the January 6 people actually, when they get their home, they're later arrested at their homes. They've used this charge specifically because some of them found they have stashes of drugs, or they have drugs. They used that, and you procured a weapon for yourself and you're doing drugs. Use that to get them in trouble when they couldn't actually get them on anything connected to January 6th. So absolutely right to point out the double standard here. I think that should be resolved in favor of not arresting people for doing drugs, not treating drugs as a criminal issue, and et cetera and so forth. And really, again, I've said this before, but the issue with Hunter Biden that is of political concern is whether he was doing influence peddling in a way that affects his father.
Right. Yeah, look, the double standard, I think, is legitimately troubling, especially because Joe Biden has been such an advocate of ratcheting up criminal penalties, author of the crime bill. It is particularly
no desire to legalize drugs from his part, as far as I can tell, even though many in the Democratic coalition and many in the Republican coalition want to do that. It never happens.
Absolutely. So it's the one level of I'm a person in a position of power and privilege who has a different standard applied to me. But if your dad literally wrote the rules that made so many people have to spend their lives in jail and who got none of the grace that the criminal justice system is now showing you, I think the outcome should, I agree, not go in the direction of hyper-incarceration and putting more people in jail. But I would like to see this as a moment that is being exploited by criminal justice advocates to push Joe Biden to follow through on some of the commitments that he did make during the 2020 election cycle to try to address his now wildly out-of-step position on crime from the 90s. And, you know, in the middle of it's wild to think that we had the George Floyd uprising. We have the expansion of these domestic terror charges that have been used against the Stop City protesters, that have arguably been used to over-prosecute some of the January 6 people, that you have ratcheted up penalties for environmental activists and the like as people increasingly are frustrated that the government isn't paying attention to these issues that Americans really care about. And the only leniency that we're seeing at the same time that we have a ratcheting up of criminal penalties is in the context of the president's own child.
Right, absolutely.
Adult son, I should say.
Adult, very, very adult son.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question remains, is there, like this can't be the end of the investigation. The investigation needs to be into these more weighty charges, not into, so the concern I think that many conservatives have is that not only the double standard, but is this just, oh yeah, we got him. Yeah, you're right. He was guilty of this kind of more minor thing. So we don't need to look at anything else. Got him. Case closed. All done. When really that's not what anyone who's being fair and honest is concerned about.
Yeah.
Honestly, the salaciousness of it made it generate a lot of news coverage because that is not appropriate, because the news coverage should be laser focused on the influence peddling.
I mean, it does cut both ways a little bit, right? And this is what some of Trump's defenders are saying in the context of his most recent indictment, that sure, he's powerful and wealthy and can defend himself in the ways that others can't, but he's only being targeted because he's famous. And the reason that we're all obsessed with this story is because he's the former president. Right. Do you think there's an argument that Hunter Biden might not have been under as much scrutiny, or this might not have been treated as seriously if he were just a regular, let's say at least a regular rich person, as opposed to a famous rich person? Yeah,
I mean, maybe. But again, people of less means than Hunter Biden get arrested for this stuff all the time. And if they don't have competent legal representation and they don't take a plea deal, they get the book thrown at them, and you could be in jail for years and years and years.
Well, Ben Shapiro, I think you mentioned some of the pushback that some conservatives are raising at this time. He tweeted, "Remember, folks, you, a law-abiding citizen owning a gun, are a danger to the republic. Hunter Biden, a crack addict who lied on gun forms and whose then girlfriend threw his gun in a dumpster across from a high school, barely did anything wrong."
Yeah, I mean, there's a point here that if you want, we do already have a lot of laws about the circumstances in which you can procure a weapon. So I think it's a little rich to be arguing for vast new gun control measures if we're not taking seriously the ones we already have. And again, I don't think Hunter Biden is a danger to people. I don't really necessarily, I'm not trying to take away his Second Amendment rights or something, but if you're not going to punish people for wrongly having guns under the existing laws, then what is the point of anything we're doing on the gun issue?
Yeah, I think that some conservatives have been making this argument about a lack of enforcement for existing crimes. And I don't necessarily have an objection to that. I do think that some crimes are overly punitive, et cetera. Right. And I do wonder about from a kind of a civil libertarian perspective, especially given that there's a lot of variation in the types of drugs that exist, about what this form does and how it can be used to over-criminalize folks. I would not like to see a world where someone who uses marijuana casually is brought up on federal charges because they technically lied on a gun form. Nor do I want to see a world where someone who casually uses marijuana is stripped of their Second Amendment rights for that reason.
But I just don't think it should be illegal to use marijuana. It's like, ideally, that would not be a law. And the law should be enforced. It's just that's not a thing that should be a law. The ambiguity of, well, it is a law, but it's probably not going to be enforced, but it could be enforced.
This is a very Joe Biden problem. This is one that Joe Biden can
100%.
Rectify, and it's very ironic.
Especially because from a deterrent standpoint, my understanding from the research is that certainty of arrest and certainty of jail time does act as a deterrent factor if it's certain. So you want
clarity.
You want clarity in the law. You want not something that, well, it is illegal, but we're not going to really, unless you really push us, or maybe it's like, no, this is illegal. You can't do this. We're catching you. You go to jail. You don't have to go to jail for the rest of your life, but like some jail time and arrest guaranteed is deterrent. So, but you only want that for things you actually want to be illegal. So it's this kind of middle ground, well, it's only kind of illegal for some people sometimes. Very bad.
Well, look, the hunt for the smoking gun, I'm sure will continue, and we'll continue to follow this story as it unfolds. More Rising for you right after this.